The content presented in this video is based on publicly available reports, resurfaced interviews, opinion commentary, and ongoing legal narratives. All individuals mentioned are considered innocent until proven guilty. This video does not assert guilt or confirm unverified claims. Its purpose is to inform, provoke thought, and encourage public awareness around topics of celebrity power, influence, and alleged misconduct. Viewer discretion is advised. Jennifer had done dozens of interviews in the past. Most were promotional and highly predictable, until one journalist, seated across from her in a glass-walled studio, lowered his voice and asked a question that hung in the air longer than it should have. Looking back, was there anything about your time with Combs that still affects you today? She didn't answer right away. There was a pause, not dramatic but still. Her expression changed, her posture slightly, the polished smile she wore for most of the interview faded, replaced by something more measured. She looked down for a moment. Then, softly, she said, "I've kept a lot of that part of my life private, but I'll say this, I saw things I didn't know how to process back then. Some powerful women has lost their place just for doing the same thing I'm doing right now." The silence that followed said more than the words themselves. It wasn't just answer that drew attention, it was the timing and the framing. And most of all, the question that wasn't asked, but was suddenly on everyone's mind. What did Jennifer see? And why are people now connecting that moment, not just to her past with Diddy, but to someone whose voice has been notably absent in recent months? Wendy Williams. As J.Lo's brief response circulated, clips of Wendy began resurfacing. Old episodes, radio recordings, the moments where she called out Diddy by name years before anyone else was willing to. Back then, her warnings were dismissed, labeled messy, emotional. But now, in the aftermath of multiple lawsuits, public fallout, and growing silence around Wendy's current condition, people are asking if Jennifer, through just one sentence, unintentionally confirmed what Wendy had tried to reveal for years. This video doesn't speculate, but it does connect timelines, testimonies, and public statements to understand how one woman's guarded words might be echoing another's long-muted voice. We'll walk through how and Williams, though never publicly aligned, found themselves connected by one man's orbit. We'll explore how J.Lo's sudden withdrawal from that relationship aligned with legal trouble, and how Wendy's criticism of the same man led to relentless backlash, media pressure, and eventual silence. But before we go further, we want your thoughts. Is Jennifer finally saying what Wendy Williams tried to say all along? Or are we only now starting to listen because someone more protected is speaking? Tell us in the comments. And if these stories, especially the ones that were overlooked, matter to you, subscribe. To understand why Jennifer's words or her hesitation struck such a chord, you have to look at the history behind it. Not just her relationship with Combs, but the quiet tension that existed for years between him and Wendy Williams. In the late 1990s, Jennifer was on the brink of global superstardom. Fresh off the success of She Began Dating Puff Daddy Combs, one of the most powerful figures in hip-hop at the time. Their relationship was high-profile, intensely publicized, and for a while carefully managed. But in December 1999, everything changed. And Combs were at a Manhattan nightclub when a shooting broke out. 3 people were injured. Both were arrested. While was released quickly and never charged, the experience would mark the beginning of her quiet withdrawal from that chapter of her life. Behind the scenes, those close to her say it was a turning point, not just legally but emotionally. Distanced herself from Combs soon after, and by early 2001, they had separated. No formal explanations were given, but it was clear that something had shifted. For years, she avoided discussing that period in interviews. While stepped back from the relationship publicly, Wendy Williams stepped in vocally. At the time, Wendy was already a force in radio, known for her unfiltered commentary. But when it came to Diddy, her tone carried more than gossip. She questioned his business practices, his relationships with rising artists, and the way women, particularly young women, were treated in his circles. Her commentary didn't go unnoticed. In fact, it sparked direct pushback. Diddy allegedly attempted to have Wendy removed from several stations. She claimed he sent people to intimidate her off the air. Whether those efforts were successful or not, Wendy never stopped speaking his name. It became personal. Wendy saw herself not just as a commentator, but as a watchdog, someone willing to ask questions others wouldn't. And over time, that role came at a cost. While her show eventually went national, her conflicts with powerful figures, especially Combs, followed her. She became a lightning rod for both admiration and criticism. And now, decades later, she is silent. Under a court-approved guardianship due to health and cognitive issues, Wendy no longer controls her show, her finances, or her public platform. Her voice, once a fixture in daily entertainment, is now missing. And it's that absence that makes Jennifer's moment so significant. The two women have never been close, but their stories orbit the same man. One had a romantic relationship, the other a public rivalry. One chose silence for years, the other spoke until her voice was taken from her. And now, for the first time, their timelines are converging in the public's mind. It's understated acknowledgement. "I saw things I didn't know how to process back then," doesn't answer every question, but it draws a line between her past and Wendy's warnings. It adds weight to something many dismissed for years as tabloid noise. Jennifer, seated across from a journalist in a neutral-toned room, had already answered a series of polite questions, most times about her career milestones. Then the subject shifted, slightly, almost casually. "You've worked with some of the biggest names in music," the interviewer said. "Do you ever look back at those early years with Puffy and feel like the public didn't know the full story?" The question landed differently. Didn't smile. She didn't deflect. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap, took a long pause, and nodded once slowly. "There are things I experienced back then that I didn't fully understand at the time," she said, her voice even. "But I've learned with distance that silence doesn't always mean safety." It wasn't what people expected her to say, and she didn't say more. The conversation quickly turned to others who had spoken up before, and suddenly Wendy Williams' name began trending. Journalists dug up past segments. In one, Wendy referred to a pattern of power and protection surrounding Diddy that made it nearly impossible for women to speak out. In another, she warned her audience that media platforms were being influenced behind the scenes, hinting at pressure she'd received for mentioning his name. One clip in particular resurfaced, Wendy on radio in the early 2000s speaking into the mic with quiet frustration. "People know what's happening," she said. "They just don't say it out loud. They're scared, and maybe they have a reason to be." At the time, few paid attention. She was brushed off as provocative, but in light of J-Lo's remarks, the tone of those clips changed. Her voice, once criticized for being too bold, now sounded eerily calm, almost resigned. And so a shift occurred. The public began comparing the two women, not in terms of fame or success, but in terms of truth and how it's received based on who says it. J-Lo, known for her careful public image, had said only a few words. Wendy had said many for years. But now, it seems brief acknowledgement was validating everything Williams had tried to expose. Legal analysts noted that whilst comment wasn't tied to any court filing, it could still carry significance. If federal investigations into Diddy's past behavior continue, particularly those involving parties, models, or coercive environments, even vague statements from past partners could be treated as informal witness accounts, especially if those accounts align with existing testimony. So far, hasn't elaborated on her remarks, and no legal proceedings have confirmed whether she will be asked to. But what her words did, intentionally or not, was reactivate a memory the public had set aside. A memory of Wendy Williams speaking into the void, trying to be heard, trying to be believed. And that's what makes this moment more than viral content. It's not just about what J-Lo said. It's about the way her quiet acknowledgement brought someone else's long-dismissed truth back into the center of the conversation. The voice that once stirred controversy, 5 days a week now lives behind silence. Wendy Williams, who built a media empire on speaking boldly and naming names, is no longer at the microphone. The studio is quiet. The cameras are off. And for the past year, her public appearances have been few, controlled, and unsettling to those who remember her differently. In 2023, following a series of health complications and reports of cognitive decline, Wendy was placed under a court-ordered guardianship. A judge ruled that she was no longer capable of managing her finances or making decisions regarding her career. Since then, all communication to the public has gone through lawyers, guardians, or brief, carefully edited statements. And so, at a time when her voice would be most relevant, it's absent. What makes this especially difficult is the contrast. For years, Wendy was one of the few public figures willing to speak openly about the behavior of powerful men in entertainment. While others stayed neutral or avoided controversy, she asked the questions that most networks wouldn't allow. And when it came to Diddy Combs, she never held back. She called out what she saw as an excessive use of power. She questioned his relationships, his influence over artists, and his role in shaping media narratives. In her words, people act like they can't see it, but they've already seen it. For that, she was criticized, labeled bitter, jealous, or unhinged. Her insights were repackaged as gossip. Her warnings were brushed off as personal attacks. But now, with Jennifer confirming, however subtly, that there were things about her past with Diddy that she didn't fully understand at the time, people are beginning to revisit Wendy's commentary with a different mindset. Because the difference between the two women isn't just about status or delivery, it's about access. Has always had the protection of image, industry respect, and mainstream endorsement. Wendy never did. Her delivery wasn't polished. Her tone wasn't neutral, but what she said now seems harder to dismiss. There's a growing sadness among longtime viewers and fans who feel that Wendy is being vindicated too late, at a time when she may no longer be fully aware of it. Her health remains the subject of speculation, but what's confirmed is that she no longer has control over her finances, her legal affairs, or her career. The documentary released earlier this year, Where is Wendy Williams?, only deepened that concern. In it, viewers saw a once vibrant woman struggling to navigate her new reality, often confused, distant, and withdrawn. The show was painful to watch, but it also made something very clear. Wendy's voice was silenced not by choice, but by circumstance. And so, when Jennifer made that comment, just a few quiet sentences that hinted at discomfort, at regret, it reopened a door that many thought had already been closed. But this time, Wendy couldn't walk through it. She couldn't respond, she couldn't reflect, she couldn't say, "I told you." In that absence, the weight of her past commentary has only grown. Because whether J-Lo meant to or not, her words revealed someone who spent years trying to speak the truth, before the world was ready to hear it. The public yet again has gone wild over these confessions. Some praised her for speaking, even in vague terms, about a period of her life that had long remained off-limits. Others criticized the comment as too careful, too late. But what united both sides was the fact that, for the first time in a long time, someone close to Diddy, someone protected by silence, had acknowledged that the past was more complicated than it seemed. And then came the flood of old footage. Wendy Williams, sitting behind her radio mic in the early 2000s, on stage in front of a live audience, in her purple chair during daytime television, warning viewers about manipulation, about control, about the way public figures can cultivate one image while hiding another. Her tone was often confrontational, but her message, looking back, was strikingly consistent. Viewers, many of whom had dismissed or ignored her at the time, are now revisiting those segments with fresh eyes. In one, she warns of a culture of protection around powerful men that keeps everyone silent. In another, she says, "If I disappear, just know I didn't go quiet on my own." That line, in particular, has taken on new meaning. Because Wendy didn't choose silence, it was placed upon her. And that difference matters, especially now. What Jennifer said was careful, but it was enough to make the public reconsider who they believed and why. And the contrast between how J-Lo's soft comment was received versus how Wendy's decades of blunt warnings were treated hasn't gone unnoticed. On social media, this disparity has become a point of reckoning. Users are calling out the double standards that have long defined who gets to be believed. They're asking why a statement from, protected by her public image, is seen as credible, while Wendy, saying many of the same things years ago, was ridiculed or ignored. There's also a broader cultural conversation now re-emerging. How Black women, particularly those who speak out against powerful men, are often framed as problematic or unstable, even when their words are accurate. Wendy is far from the only example, but hers is among the most visible and tragic. Some former critics have gone public with apologies. Others are posting montages of her old interviews, placing them side by side with more recent headlines about Diddy's legal troubles and media scrutiny. And while has not elaborated on her remarks, her silence since that moment has only fueled speculation. Did she say more off-camera? Did she face pushback? Or was that single, careful line her way of distancing herself without risking retaliation? Whatever the intent, the outcome is clear. Jennifer reopened a conversation. And this time, the public is listening differently. The shift in tone around Wendy Williams isn't just about sympathy. It's about recognition. Recognition that what she tried to expose, sometimes messily, sometimes imperfectly, may have been rooted in truths that people weren't ready to hear. There's a difficult truth at the center of this moment, one that can't be ignored. It looked back at Wendy Williams and saw something it hadn't been ready to see before. For years, Wendy spoke what others avoided. She warned about influence, about manipulation, about how power can move quietly behind public image. She was mocked for it. She was told to tone it down. She was called bitter, messy, and unprofessional. Her audience grew, but so did the resistance to her truth. And now she can't speak for herself. Whether by health, court decisions, or something else entirely, Wendy Williams no longer controls her voice, not in the legal sense and not in the cultural one either. But somehow, through another woman's words, her voice has returned. Not loudly, not directly, but in the questions Jennifer raised and in the silence that followed, Wendy's legacy reemerged. This moment forces reflection, not just on Diddy or the women around him, but on how society decides who is worth listening to. In a clip of her show that went viral, Wendy had invited Daddy, and he directly sent a threat to Wendy about him meeting her 16-year-old son already. That conversation looked pretty normal until now. Wendy knew what he does to young children, and she understood how weighty his words were. Why was Wendy discredited when she said the same things years earlier? Why do people need confirmation from someone like, whose image has always been more protected, to believe what they already heard from someone else? And what does that say about the culture we've all been part of? Jennifer didn't break the story. She didn't intend to unravel anything. But her hesitation, her carefully worded truth, revealed something bigger than a personal experience. It revealed how tightly the entertainment industry has been held together by silence, and how fragile that silence becomes when even one voice shifts. That shift didn't start with, but it echoed louder because of who she is. And now the public is rethinking, rewatching, reconsidering what Wendy said, what she endured, and what it cost her to say it. There's still a long way to go. Diddy's legal battles are ongoing. Public figures continue to distance themselves quietly, hopping to avoid questions. And as always, the truth, the full truth, remains somewhere between testimony, memory, and what was never recorded. But this moment matters, because it reminds us that truth isn't always delivered in breaking headlines or bold accusations. Sometimes it arrives in hesitation, in soft admissions, in the silence after a question is asked and carefully answered. And sometimes that's all it takes to shift the narrative and force us to listen again to the people we once ignored. So we leave you with this. Was Jennifer finally confirming what Wendy Williams had been saying all along? Or did her words only matter because of the name attached to them? Tell us what you think in the comments. Share this story if you believe in revisiting the truths we didn't hear the first time. And subscribe as well. Thank you. What are your thoughts? Do you think Jennifer finally said what Wendy Williams couldn't? Or are we just now choosing to hear what was always in front of us? If this video made you pause, reflect, or rethink what you once dismissed, share it, comment below, and subscribe for more stories that challenge the surface, honor silenced voices, and ask the harder questions the industry avoids.